Well, hey, disciples, welcome back to the Red Letter Disciple, where we challenge each and every person to be the greatest disciple of Jesus that they can possibly become. Chris Johnson, my co-host and friend, pastor of Resurrection Church in Sanford, Florida, will be joining me in a moment, and we're going to invite Robby Engel onto the show today. Robby Engel is the CEO of True Face, a really awesome organization, but he's also a small groups extraordinaire. He's a discipleship advisor to Right Now Media, one of our favorite partners that we get to work with. And so he's also, check this out, the dad of 8 kids. So my goodness, their family of 10 is, I can't imagine what their grocery bill is like every week. But he was also the men's group director at North Point Community Church, one of the largest churches in our nation. So he's going to really come and help us today on learning about how to do effective small groups. And really what he believes 65% of our attention needs to go to when we talk about how to have a thriving small group ministry. Speaking of small groups, one of our partners that I already mentioned, Right Now Media, that's today's podcast partner. And I can't speak highly enough of this incredible ministry. I really view them, and others have said it as well, as the Netflix of small groups. Every pastor, we know the importance of small groups. And again, we're going to dive into how to do small groups and important things with small groups. But we know that if we get them right, that's going to spur on discipleship. And this is the #1 platform for content out there. Church leaders, you can visit rightnowmedia.org to learn more about Right Now Media and to schedule a free demo. They are the world's largest library of Bible study videos with more than 25,000 discipleship resources from Christian leaders like me and Robby and other great Christian leaders like Tim Tebow and Francis Chan and Jenny Allen and Derwin Gray. And, I like putting me and Robby up there with those guys. But anyway, check it out at rightnowmedia.org. You can schedule a free in-depth tour of their video library today. Additionally, church leaders, I want to invite you to register for a free webinar that I'm doing in November with Right Now Media on their platform that's all about existing and helping, all about helping pastors in their churches. The webinar with them is November 13th. Mark your calendar, noon to 1 p.m. Central. And I'm going to be helping churches with discipleship and how do you measure and define what your discipleship targets are. So go to rightnowmedia.org/webinars and you can register for free for this webinar in November that I get the privilege to lead. So thank you, Right Now Media, for that opportunity. I'm so pumped to be jumping on your platform to help thousands of pastors. And I would love all of you pastors that are listening to this to jump on Right Now Media's platform. It's going to be an amazing opportunity to spur on discipleship for you. So without further ado, we got a great conversation to talk to today with Robby Engel on the power and how to do small groups. And so in just a moment, we're going to get there. But if you haven't yet, I just got to plea one more time. Will you rate and review? Will you subscribe and follow to the Red Letter Disciple so that every week it hits your inbox? And we'd love to know the difference this is making in your life so you can be a great disciple. So without further ado, come on, let's do this. Well, here we go. Another episode of Red Letter Disciple, and really thrilled today to bring Robby Engel onto the podcast today. He's the president and CEO of True Face. He lives in Dawsonville, Georgia with his wife, Emily, and their, listen to this, 8 children.
So I was talking to Robby. He said his goal is to get 3 more so he can have his own XFL team. I don't know if you saw it. Yeah. So that's exciting.
That is exciting. Yeah. Because I think the XFL with The Rock may be coming back or is back or something anyway. But anyway, Robby's had quite a bio and history. He served for 7 years as the director of adult ministry, environments, and men's group for North Point Community Church, one of the largest churches in our nation there in Atlanta. He's done professional counseling. He's overseen international disaster response teams. And he's the discipleship advisor for one of our partners. We love Right Now Media. He's a contributor on there as well, and really helps a lot of pastors and leaders around the idea of small groups. And so we're going to spend our time talking through small groups and a lot of stuff today.
A lot of people I've heard this recently, Right Now Media, the Netflix of Bible stuff. Have you heard that said?
I have, and it's amazing. Robby Engel, welcome to the Red Letter Disciple. Before we even talk small groups, you actually formed one in your own home with 8 children. What's the size of a small group? Did you get one in your family? Is that why you did that?
Well, with 10 of us total, it's a little big, in my opinion, for a healthy size small group, and we're paying the consequences of that. But that's a whole different, deeper issue.
Yeah.
as a pastor of a new church plant, if I saw your family walk through, I would get you anything that you wanted because our attendance is going to go up 15% with just your family involved. So that's pretty encouraging. Yeah.
But you can never go on vacation or ever not show up because you would be noticed.
So noticed. If your family's not there, like it's dipping that week. Yeah.
Tell me,
we're at a small church. So right now we're at a smaller church. And so people, it feels nice. People miss us. And it's because the noise level's down, the chaos is down, but they're like, we missed y'all. And I think it was a positive that we weren't there when we're not there, but we are missed.
So what's the age range with 8 children?
It was 8 and 8 years. So they're 13 to 5. 6 boys, 2 girls, 2 sets of twins, 5 adopted, 3 bio. My wife has problems, and I've enabled them.
So I have this problem. I only have 2 children, and sometimes I call them the wrong name. Like you have to screw up occasionally with that many kids, right?
All the time. Yeah. My wife just loves babies, and I kept like saying yes, and they were coming from everywhere, bio, adopted, but
like you would just come home from work, and there's like, hey, I want to introduce you to your new son. Is that how
it's? Kinda.
All right. Can we talk about this?
Advantages that we maybe wouldn't think about, disadvantages we wouldn't think about of being a family of 10.
Well, there's no sports cars in this house. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, well, the advantages, I actually did give myself a sports car for my 40th birthday so that they couldn't be in the car with me. And but that's another thing. But the advantage would be like it's never like they always have somebody to play with. They get annoyed by this person, they shift over there, and we have a birthday party tonight. That happens a lot. And it's like, hey, you start with a baseline of 8 kids. You know, it's like, hey, let's have a party. Disadvantages is kind of the same with anybody with 3 or more kids. You know, no time, no money, no energy.
Yeah.
And the biggest tension struggle, I mean, nothing changes after 3 in that department. It's just marginal, you know, but the tension is just, am I, you know, the dad guilt of, am I doing enough quality time connecting with each kid's heart? It's just hard. That's the struggle.
Yeah, and the grocery bill must be monumental as well. I have to imagine. Like, I mean, I have 2 kids, and every time I go to the grocery store, like I forget something that they want. I can't imagine. Like, you have some kind of list on the fridge that you just have to work through, or what? How do you work that?
Yeah, it's a problem. I'm a math guy. I was a business finance undergrad. I'm a math guy, and it's pretty like with. You know, we're not going political on this, but with inflation and all the stuff going, I'm looking at my height. And the bills of my kids go up. They're starting to eat. Bills are going up. And as a math guy, it's pretty clear. It doesn't really work well. We had that conversation last night.
And I'm just wondering. I'm wondering, like, and I'll get off this topic, but this is just intriguing to me as a man with 2 kids and that is barely making it myself. Do you have a bus? Like, how do you drive everybody around?
Yeah, we're that weird. Like homeschool looking Ford Transit, 15 passenger. We're those people. I tried to get my wife to get into the long skirt game. She didn't bite. But
so you had to get, what's that special license to just move your family around, like the license C?
No.
All right.
It feels like it.
I can only imagine, and especially with the food, with them getting older. Like I feel like once my oldest turned from, I don't know, 14 to 15, like he just started eating like 4 times as much, and you're gonna have that like times.
Have to lock
8 kids. So
lock the pantry.
Lord, we need a prayer of blessing and favor over Robby and his wife. We're praying specifically for financial blessing today.
We pray that you would drop manna in the front yard, and when they walk out, they can pick up.
Let it be. Amen. All right, tell me what you're working on now. True Face. What is True Face, and why are you committed to the mission there?
So True Face is a 30-year-old ministry. I survived founder transition 5 years ago, took over from the founder president, Bruce McNichol and Bill Thrall. They founded it 30 years ago. They wrote a book called The Cure, 100-page book, tagline, "What if God isn't who you think he is and neither are you?" I read it about 15 years ago, and it was, I love reading, and it was my favorite book I've ever read in my life. And so it really gets to grace and identity in a way that was really helped me get unstuck in some ways. And so I infused it into every small group at North Point. I said, this is the core teaching on theology identity to shape a culture and a community around following Jesus. And so I bought enough boxes of the book that the author called me one day and said, "Who are you?" And I was like, "Dude, I read everything you guys write." So I got to build a relationship with them. I took over, and really what the ministry is, we're a small, nimble ministry, and we want to catalyze a movement of grace. Christians are stuck. We want deeper relationships with God and others. We don't know how to do that. And we think that we get unstuck in the intersection of a right view of God and right view of self through a lens of grace, experienced in the context of relationships, which is hard to find and do. And when that happens, we experience transformation. We see God, who he is, the way we are, and we love others around us in a noticeably different way, which is why we build a toolbox of grace-based relational discipleship tools for churches, individuals to experience deeper relationships with God and others.
It's interesting that the author called you after, purchasing so many books. If Zach is also an author, and if you buy 5 of his books, he comes over and cooks you breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So that is an actual, he'll do that. 5 copies.
Yeah, thank you for
Let's
that.
go.
Yes.
And now his integrity is on the line for the next buyer. The next buyer, let us know.
There you go.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. So you're reading this Cure book. It's really gripping you, and obviously you become a part of this ministry, and it would lead you to write the Cure for Groups, which is taking those same kind of theological foundational elements, but then overlaying it over small groups. And did you use this at North Point, as you said?
Well, I wrote it once I came to TrueFace. When I'm a praxis guy. So I read The Cure, and it talks about God's design for us to grow through the context of community and relationships. And as a professional counselor, small groups nerd, I'm like but how? We read that, we go, I want that. I want to experience formation, discipleship, spiritual growth. Okay, God's designed me to do that in relationships. And then we get into groups, and very few of us grow. So it's like, this is a freaking problem. And so I'm a groups nerd, and I could not find a resource to equip my small group leaders with. And so I was telling the TrueFace guys, y'all need to write a book around principles that differentiate great leaders from lame leaders. And they were like, no. And then they're like, why don't you come be the president? And so then I had to put my money where my mouth is. And so we wrote a book, really understanding the principles that, differentiated the great leaders I worked with out of hundreds of leaders versus the lame leaders. And it was different than what most people think and how they equip people. And so this was an equipping resource for churches to be able to give it to a small group leader, and that small group leader understand things that actually move the needle for the sake of the formation, the growth, the outcomes of their group.
We were talking a little bit before this, and I've recent church plant. We're 13 months into it, have a lot of energy, have about 100 weekly people, 100 attendance each week. And I had a bunch of goals, and the only goal that I did not hit was successfully launch small groups. I mean, it fizzled. It was like a pop bottle rocket. I made that.
It's okay. But you hit a lot of goals.
I know.
We're going to help you today with that.
But
all right?
and one of the things that happened is that some people that approached me that wanted to be small group leaders, I didn't know if they were equipped to be the small group leaders. And I tried to galvanize a lot of people to get the movement going. And currently we have one. So I'm just wondering, I'm going to buy your book because I have to get on a plane after this, and I'm going to read it. But I'm wondering, what kind of advice would you have for the new church planter that is trying to get, we believe that discipleship happens through service and small groups. What kind of advice would you give to a new church planter like me, who's already kind of fizzled one launch, but wants to do it and knows it's important?
Man, so this gets to the principles and the problem of discipleship. High level or low level, that's a broad enough question, which is the point of this conversation. So I guess we can unpack it and tackle both. But at the question is, really that every church and every church planner should be asking and does ask, which I love that you ask and are prioritizing, is do we have an effective plan for discipling the adults of our church? And the second question typically is, do we have the quality and quantity of small group leaders to make that happen? Sunday school teacher, cell group, life group. Small group is just a descriptive dynamic for a smaller sized environment that's relational for the sake of growth. So do we have an effective plan to disciple the adults, and do we have the quality and quantity of leaders to make that happen? So most of us listening that are in church go no and no. And I said that at and we were giving conferences on small groups. I stepped into the men's groups and then overall the small groups in North Point, and I would say no to both of those, which is a really big problem. And if God's designed us to grow through the context of relationships, and any church over 50 adults should create an environment that's more conducive for relational connection and therefore growth, right? Per our design and per Jesus's model, master plan evangelism with his disciples, more time, fewer people, greater kingdom impact. So we set up small groups, life groups.
I'm thinking if North Point can't do it, one of the biggest churches in the country, as 100 people, I'm host at this point. I'm just going to sell cars.
Well, it gets to the essence of the difficulty.
Yeah.
So those questions, and a church says like, okay, if that's the problem, then we got to ask why. And usually so the why piece is different than we think. And I'll tell you the problem of the approach that I see most churches do. What they do is say, okay, groups are lame, life groups, cell groups, whatever, it's not working. So we read a book, we go to a conference, and we say, hey, what's a new model? What's a new system? And we plug and play, launch groups, launch this new system. And then after 2 to 3 years, it's not working. And we go, well, groups don't work. So that is because we're starting with trying to fix groups by focusing on the system, the best practices. And therefore, my advice is typically never starting there, because I've seen every single model. Life group, cell group, D group. I've seen all the models work and not work. And so it's like, okay, some are terrible, some are amazing, same model. But that's what we focus the majority of our focus on as small group leaders, because we need solutions and answers, and it's our job. And you're asking, going, what's your advice? What should I do? You're thinking model system, most likely. Most churches are like, what's the best one? And I'm saying that's not the right question. The real question to get to the primary questions of do we have an effective plan and quality of leaders is, what is our culture and philosophy of formation? So what does discipleship mean? And what is change theory that underpins how people actually grow? Because then that shapes what kind of environment you create that's a catalyst for that. And the second piece is, if the one piece of advice, the one thing I would do to any church is focus on developing a pipeline for the quality and quantity of leaders. Because if you develop a pipeline, which is discipleship, leader development, whatever you want to call it, of quality and quantity of leaders, that's about 65% of the equation of the efficacy of the small group, independent of the model, the approach, seasons, open, close, men's, women's, 18 months, multiply. Those are details. The macro piece is the health of the leader. And so the question is, what's your pipeline, your leader development pipeline, your quality and quantity of leaders, and what is a healthy leader? How do you develop a leader? And if you can figure that out, those leaders then go replicate what they experienced. And then all of a sudden you have awesome groups that lead to growth.
That's awesome.
That's good.
Great point.
Yeah. So I love that. I think models, programs, systems, details, important, but the most important is, are we developing, and how are we developing those leaders? And so, because I think it's true with anything, like, we hear all the time about how important it is for someone, and I'm a proponent of it as well, to, if you're having issues, like, go see a counselor. Like we've got to normalize counseling. But I've also been to good counselors, I've been to bad counselors. And if I go to a bad counselor and someone says that, I'm like, I don't know if I need counseling. And I think the same thing's true with groups. Like, it is an incredible discipleship opportunity, but there are good groups and there are bad groups. If someone had a bad group, they're more likely to not want to go into another group. And so I'd love to hear from you, like the small group guy that's writing the books on it, that was leading in one of the largest churches groups, that, like, what's the best small group you've ever been a part of that maybe you weren't leading? And what made it so special, or what made it something you still remember today?
It was a group I was in. It was a guys group. And I think what differentiated it and made it special is we were we weren't playing around. We were in a season of growth and hunger. And the things that stood out the most are, there's factors like when you have a shared mission or something come up that's in the way, or like a cancer, somebody loses a job. There's a lot to learn from like the SEALs and special forces when it comes to group theory and change theory. Uh, uh, like the power of a shared mission. There was a nice balance in that group, which we were together for 2 to 3 years of some really difficult stuff, family stuff that deepen the relationships outside of the meeting. And we had a couple people in the group that had different family of origins and different church upbringings, and we experimented with stuff. We would jump into group and have different guys lead each week, and we just experimented with stuff. Like we kind of divided and conquered who did what week, and if we and so a person would be responsible for the discussion and if there's any prep work. And I think back to that group, some of those were so weird and not normal that it just kind of kicked us out of into a sharpening and a challenging environment. That was a great group.
That's cool. And I think that's really good too. Like a group that has some sort of shared mission or something that's deeper than just coming together and kind of doing the normal hour 15 of, hearing someone talk for a bit and then answering questions based on that. And I do like too that a couple people that have different origin stories, that maybe even different faith backgrounds. Like it just leads to like not everybody's just nodding their head yes at everything, because there's complexity and there's tell me more about that. That maybe I think we missed some.
Yeah, that brings up something I completely forgot about. About 10 years ago, one of my good friends, he lost his wife to breast cancer, and he wasn't leaving the house, and he had 2 small kids. And so a bunch of guys from the church, we knew he loved fishing. So we said every Sunday night for the next 8 weeks, we're going to go fishing. We're going to make sure you come. We're going to pick you up. Then we went to a local bar and did like a devotional. And it was like the most impactful, by far, small group that I had ever been a part of.
Yeah,
that's right.
Go ahead.
A lot of groups, it's the importance and the component of that mission, that getting outside into each other's lives. That's hard to find and hard to do. Right. But a group is, it's either make or break when those things happen. And when you lean in and wade through it together, it's something special when you have each other's back. And you can kickstart some of that by like weekend. We did some surveys, and one of the greatest differentiators of a group was, did they get away for a night, at least one night a year? Did they get away for like some type of shared relational experience? That could be anything, but did they get away for an overnighter? And I think so. We were asking, what's the reason behind that? Why those groups expressed so much better groups and connectedness? I think there's a missional piece of that they bonded, they connected on a deeper level. And a lot of times they would ask the question, which a great question for a small group is, based on our time, talents, and treasures, what is God inviting us to partner with him on in the kingdom? So that missional aspect, missional group, there's a lot to learn from missional communities. There's a strength in missional communities that's really strong, because how quickly and frequently they ask that question and go, God, how do we partner with you and what you're doing in the kingdom? And is there something specific that this group that we can be a part of?
Yeah. So for you, if a lot of it, and I agree, hinges on the, I would say, quality and quantity of leaders, specifically small group leaders, are there best practices, or how would you coach train and develop the leaders if you're a pastor at a church and you're looking to either launch or relaunch or just kind of bring improvement to it? What would be some things you'd recommend?
So I'll tell you what I did at North Point. Before that, just again, 2 parts. The culture and theory of change. And this is the like gloss over, what do you mean? That's going to take too long. But that is so significant, because if you asked a lead pastor, a groups pastor, hey, how do people grow? What's your theory of change? therefore, why are they getting together in group, and do those align? That's a hard question. And Sunday's coming, and we don't even have a group model. And so we just plug and play a model, and we just miss it. And to simplify this and sum it up, think about it this way. Do we see formation growth, which is the goal of groups, which is the way I've looked at it for most of my life as a professional Christian? Growing looks like knowing more and sinning less. So read the Bible, pray more, do the thing, give more, show up to church, sin less. So know more and do better. Really has what the undercurrent was in studies, in groups, in why I'm getting together in groups, to know more and do better. The problem is, and as a professional Christian, that was the framework for formation that I thought for most of my life. The problem is that's not the gospel. And that shapes a culture of discipleship that's embedded into all of our studies and our processes and our plans, partly because it's easier for us to systematize that. Yes, that's easier to deal with. Know this, do better, do this as a group. What growth looks like is, if Christ is in me and I'm a new creation and I'm a saint who sins, not a sinner striving to be a saint, this is the lens of grace, where God is a loving Father. I had nothing more I can do to gain any more of his love. And I'm his son with access to the Holy Spirit, who is infused with the righteousness of Christ with a new identity. Then trusting and receiving looks like formation, looks like growth. Well, how do you trust and receive? Jesus summed it up in John 15, just abide. Okay, how do you do that? Well, we do that together in relationships of intimacy and attachment, like Jim Wilder talks about, with God and with others. We practice this thing of love and attachment, of trusting and receiving, not knowing and doing. So think about how that subtle shift would change an entire environment and a culture of discipleship top down, through trainings, through studies, through everything. And think about those environments. The know more and do better is like, you can close your eyes and think of that small group. Did you do this? Check this. We got to get through this, learn this. What'd you think about this? It's cerebral. The trusting and receiving is experiential, it's relational, and it's vulnerable. That culture changes our interpersonal dynamics and how we interact in a group. So that's a lot. I just threw it, y'all, but you're smiling, which means you get it. But think about, if we're not proactive of shaping a culture, how the current always pulls us towards knowing and doing, which is at the core of the problem of the capital C church. And it's not condemning. This is the problem of the capital C church for 2,000 years. You foolish Galatians, who bewitched you? You started out in faith. So this is like, I'm going to start there and then actually get to your leader development question. But that, I just had to say that, because that's at the essence. And so with Right Now Media in discipleship framework that we're building for churches to help come alongside them to change their cultures of discipleship, we start with ministry philosophy, what they think about discipleship, how that affects culture of work, any model or any strategy or any tips and tricks, and how that is infused deeply into how you develop a leader. Because the question, that's why I had to give this wordy disclaimer of how do you develop a leader? A leader, the core of a leader is rooted in his or her theology and identity, right? You and I go, if we look, and so, sorry, I'll pause because I know I just rambled, and I'll get to actual leader development. If that's the one thing I would do as a church, develop leaders, how to do that, I'll actually tell you how. But does that make sense?
Sure. I think totally. I can always, and I even had a friend that, has been in lots of different small groups, Bible studies, whatever you want to call them. And he's just not that interested in getting together with, a few other couples he barely knows and answering questions and having the awkward 30-second pause before someone answers. And the leader says, I'll wait. And so because I think a lot of those that he's been a part of are the knowing and the doing and the answering questions based on those. Right. And so we just recently with him, it's just me and him and two other guys who we just got together and said, we're not really interested in doing that type of group with this group of guys. So what it took us about 6 times to get together monthly of figuring out what we even wanted to do. But we said, you know what, we're all dads of kids that are about the same age. We want to be great dads. So we called ourselves the Great Dads Group. and we're reading the book together and we talk about our families and try to challenge each other to do some great dad stuff during the month. And I think it's been really like kind of fresh, but it goes to your your core. That's an identity I'm wearing right now. I obviously will hopefully always wear, of being a father, but also a shared common goal and experience that I think we're finding that is neat. And so,
And you just articulated why this is the horse before the cart in the culture, because buddies worn out from groups that are under the framework of know more and do better, those groups look like fixing and teaching and preaching and that kind of thing, in which most small groups, hey, what do? Give us something that leans us. The gravity pulls us towards know more and do better. He said, I'm tired of that. So you said, let's have a culture of moving from fixing to walking with, where we can be known and loved. And in that, if that's the culture, then you can go, what do we want to do? And what we'll do is focus on dads, because this is our season we're in. Now, great dads is your goal. If you were from the old culture of like, let's be great dads, picture that group. It's more of the same. You could do the same topics and it'd be like, what are you doing? Did you do this? And it's like, am I growing? Am I experiencing God's love more deeply in my life? Am I hearing from him in my life? Is the fruit of the Spirit coming out in front of my kids? I'm trying to be a great dad versus I want to be a great dad. Christ in me, live out of that in a context of being known and loved and processing together as we walk with each other, which is what you described. That same topic would be very different culturally. So if a leader, so how do you develop leaders that lead a healthy culture group? That is that is the question, the thing for any church.
Question. Yeah.
That's the $1 million question. Start there. So I went to North Point and I started, they had like men's groups scattered among married group directors. And I went on a rant about that because no one was focused on men. So Bill Willits, who started North Point and was over group, said, hey, we'll give you all the men's groups. We think there's like 50. And they're like, here's all the men's groups. And so we said our hedgehog, Jim Collins, the number one thing is an exceptional leader, right? And I say it's 65% of the equation of the efficacy of a group is the health of the leader. So that's the hedgehog. If you focus on one thing, healthy leader, his and her theology, identity. So I went down North Point and said, what's the health of our leader? This is the hedgehog. And we were like, well, we never have enough leaders. So we do formative groups. We have curriculum for groups that don't have a leader. And pretty much we take anybody with a heartbeat who says they love Jesus and raises their hand to lead a small group, right? Pastors, everybody listening to this, we go, who wants to lead? I do. Do you love Jesus? Yes. Okay, great. We're going to put you in charge of the key for how, based on Jesus's model, for how formation discipleship happens in the church. Got it. 100%. And we'll do an orientation. Don't worry. We'll tell you how to have hard conversations and whether you should call us if somebody's suicidal. And then you're good, right? And so I'm like, whoa. If I told Bill Willits, I said, hey, and I don't do good with structures and rules. That's again, issues. Another shot. I said, Bill, I don't know if I said it this way, but pretty much if we have integrity and if you have integrity and the hedgehog is an exceptional leader, then if I have any group launch without an amazing leader in 2 years, you should fire me. So if I have a group launch without a great leader, if that's the hedgehog for my job professionally, then you should fire me if you have integrity. He laughed. He's like, you're crazy. We've never had a season of groups with enough leaders. And the leaders we do have are raise your hand, whatever. So I built an advisory team of 9 of the most amazing men I could find. So I got all these gray hair guys and I got them in a room. And out of like 30,000 people, I got some heavy hitters. And I said, hey guys, I'm new. No one's looking. It's like this one crop of ground at North Point that nobody had built anything on called men's stuff. And so I said, and there's this thing, shoot bullets, not cannonballs at big organizations. I don't know how to do that. And so I got all these like cannonball guys and they were like, hey, let's spend a year developing something, shoot all the cannonballs at once and see if we can change the culture. Because what if we could have formation, transformation as a norm, not an exception? Then that becomes a pipeline that a large church can be known for the discipleship and the depth and the health of the men and women of the church. So I said, I'm all in and I don't care if they fire me. So let's go. So these 9 guys and we said, well, what do we do? Well, if we invested deeply in developing future and potential small group leaders of our church. So we spent a year doing just that. These 9 guys, we all collaborated, aligned, we shared, and we said, we don't know how to do relational discipleship. If you, and this is a problem. If you ask 100 men and women from 100 different churches, which is why you do this podcast, I know I'm about to wake a giant here in you, but the problem why you do what you do, if you ask 100 men and women, 100 different churches, do they want to fulfill the Great Commission and go and make disciples? They say yes. And then you say, okay, how's your disciple making going the past 12 months? They'd say, terrible. We don't know what to do and who to do it with. And so I'm like, this is all kinds of problems, right? We've lost the art of discipleship. We don't have a leader pipeline. And so those 9 guys, what we did, we nominated, I went to my 50 small group leaders and I said, nominate a future or potential leader of our church to be invited to apply to an invitation-only group led by these 9 guys who everybody wants to get time with. And so I got 100 names of people who are future or potential leaders. I emailed them one email with a video from our lead pastor, Clay Scroggins. And he said, you've been nominated as a future leader of our church and invited to apply to an invitation-only group, 9 months, full commitment to experience authentic community and have a model of an exceptional leader. And it's all around, and we're going to go deep in our view of God and self. And over one email, over half those guys applied and said, please let me in. Wow. And so I played matchmaker. 9 guys. I said, you find a co-leader, one of your buddies that is beyond reproach, a model, healthy, loves Jesus, fruit of the Spirit. And you invest in 7 or 8 guys for 9 months. You meet once a month for 3 hours so they can stay in their current small groups. Mm-hmm. Because the problem is we were saying current small group leaders, you invest in, people in your group to be future leaders. Well, if my current small group leader is a 5 out of 10, he picks a 3 out of 10 to learn from him. We're replicating mediocrity, and that should be our responsibility. So I'll get these 9 out of 10s to invest in the 3 out of 10s. And that's a model of leadership. That's an experience of community. So we all shared what we were doing. We set up a plan, and there was a formation and change theory embedded into the 9 months. And to a norm, people said, I see God differently. I see myself differently. We interviewed wives. We launched 10 groups and 80 guys. So it was 10 groups and 10 groups, 80 guys, right? For 9 months, full commitment. You can't miss a meeting. You read a book a month, blah, blah, blah. I interviewed the wives at the end and said, do you notice the difference in how your husband loves you? Do you it was legit, man. Talk about make you cry. You read letters from wives about transformation. Wow. And so those 80 guys had a model of exceptional leader and experience of authentic community. And they went through view of God, self in the context of a safe environment. And The Cure, we were using The Cure in one of the books by True Faith, Bo's Cafe. I was buying all these books, remember? I was at North Point. We were using that as the core teaching on changing our view of God and self. And then the next group link, right? The next time that groups were kicking off in August, I had leaders leave with nobody to fill their groups because I had too many leaders, and they were the best trained leaders in our church. And so I had these leaders without groups. Guess what leaders do? They go find people. They're inviting people from outside the church to do community with. And that started shaping a culture. And every year after that, we never had a group without a leader. If that's really our hedgehog. We put all our focus on developing that environment, which I continued. I've seen it at a ton of churches. I've read so many surveys, but that, again, shaping that. And they were the best leaders in our church. That started changing a culture. So then with those guys, the questions like, well, did you open, close? What book study did you do? It doesn't matter. Like those guys are walking with doing it because they had a model of it. And once you taste and experience the freedom of being known in community with others, you don't go back to supper club casual stuff because you'd go, no. I've tasted the freedom of being known. Like y'all know the last 5% of me. I'm doing life with you. I'm not going back to lame stuff. Mm-hmm. And so that started changing the culture. That was windy, but
No, that's
yeah.
well, it's windy, but that's a good wind. We need to hear more of
I
that.
just got The Cure. What if God isn't who you think he is, and neither are you, on Audible while we were talking.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think that hits it so much of what I hear quite a bit, because obviously with creating these 40-day challenges that have a small group component and a piece to them, I, you know, I know how in our materials, they've proven like I can launch, relaunch, or grow your small groups like crazy for these 40 days. And we have a proven success and pattern. I even wrote a guide, 5-step. We call it the super simple, easily doable 5-step guide to grow your small groups. I can do that. We can do that. It's good. Those are details. They're important.
Yes.
But what I'm hearing from you, and I totally agree, is that's the secondary piece. The primary piece is that's harder. That's not 5-step, super simple, easily doable. Is the formation piece that takes some time and some intentionality, and even the right invitation to the right people, and that's where, because I get a lot of pastors that, oh, this was amazing for 40 days and our groups were up 50. I just got it yesterday. We were up 50%. What do we do now?
Right.
And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, right now media is amazing, and it is. There's so many great studies. And those details, those books are important. Those studies are important, but they're the details after. I think is what you're saying. So I'm just asking you to confirm this. But let's focus more on if you really want it long term, it's got to be formation and development. And these things can come in secondary.
Yeah, we in the Cure for Groups, I talk about really what breaks down an effective group and a healthy group. I think it's 65% the health of a leader. Health of a leader is more contingent on theology and identity than practices, knowing how to, the art of facilitating. But then about 25% is how they use that time. That's what you're talking about. The systems, the tools, those are important, but they're just not the macro. And 15%, if that math's right, or 10, whatever, is like the
105% now, but whatever.
That's right. Did a death happen? That's the chemistry. That's the season of life. Things you can't systematize. So what you're talking about is, we've got to slow down and get to the root of philosophy, change theory, and leader development. And that's what, when Brian Mosley, the president of Right Now Media, we built a relationship. We've been nerding out about this as friends for a couple years. And his passion is, Right Now Media is a resource for discipleship. And he's like, we've got to go deeper in relationship with the churches to be a partner ally in discipleship. And so he's like, what do you think? What do we do? And this is where it breaks down into slow and unsexy work, which is ministry philosophy, leader development, and culture and change theory. And if you get that right, that's the 65%. Then the 25%, the tools, the 40-day, the red letter, all the resources are exponentially more powerful in the context of a healthy environment. And so that's when Brian said, hey, let's do this. The master plan of evangelism. We watched Jesus. He was so inefficient and he was so slow. And it's discipleship looks like this messy principle of more time with fewer people for greater kingdom impact in an environment where everything's big and scale and efficiency, right? And in our societies. So Brian said, let's do that. Let's build out teaching frameworks to help guide framework and leader development and ministry philosophy change. And that's what we've been working on in this discipleship framework thing that's coming out in November or January 1st, probably, for all the Right Now Media churches to get to this leader development pipeline, the issues, and then be supported with the tools that you're talking about, which are needed and critical, but the cart behind the horse.
Yeah, and I think you're totally right. That's the point of this podcast is, the 25% for the materials, the resources is important, but most pastors and church leaders don't know how to do disciple making. And I think it was 2022 Lifeway study. What are the greatest needs of pastors in 2022? And that they're willing, that they admit and they're willing to invest in was the question. And at the very top of it, 63%. Ahead of technology, ahead of communication, ahead of leadership for their own, ahead of all of it, was disciple making, 63%. And to me, that tells me two things. They know it's important, but number two, they don't know how to do it. And this is what I'm saying is the 65, what you're saying is the 65% that will tell you whether the other stuff can work or not. You can try all the programs and resources, and I hope you buy a lot of my books and try those as you're, but all of that won't,
if you don't have the leader.
If you don't have the leadership and the infrastructure set up.
Right. You know what?
And the leader,
it's so important. Yeah.
And the leader connected to the ministry philosophy or culture on how we change and how we grow. And even to how Chris kicked this off is like, just to affirm anybody listening to this, this is really difficult. It's really dynamic. I'm a professional counselor who like studied how change happens through the context of relationships and group therapy. And then I went into a groups nerd and spent 10,000 hours thinking about this, studying, researching, reading hundreds of surveys of when you did that in month 2, it did a difference to that. This is like nerd level stuff that most people don't have time to go into. That's why the tools that Zach is talking about, that Right Now Media has, just bypasses some of this, hopefully, so that we can serve y'all to do what God's gifted you to do. And there's like all this stuff, you don't have to reinvent it. Even at True Face, we have the True Face Journey, which is a 9-month framework you can plug and play, call it First Baptist Discipleship. We'll give you everything. You can white label it. Who cares if more people fall in love with Jesus? But this is like, the fact that you're listening to this podcast, anybody listening to this says we align with the motto of Jesus, and it's really difficult. And so well done. And if it's easy, you're lying or naive.
Yeah, that's good. And I think that's true too, is like I see you and obviously the work that we do. It is so hard to lead a church and to, there's daily things that are on your calendar. There's things that always need to happen. Sunday comes around once every 7 days. There's people that need to see you. There's people that are hurting, people that are sick. There's funerals, there's weddings. And so on top of all that, go and make new disciples, figure out discipleship formation. How do you do it? Like, that seems exhausting. And I'm telling you, it is. And that's why, like, you don't have to, what Robby's saying, you don't have to start from scratch. Like, you've got a couple of us that have a little more time and space that think about this stuff every day, that if we can, forward the ball a little bit for you or help you in that path, like, let us do that and let the tools do that. I'm really interested in the discipleship framework that you're talking about. Can you tease it out for me? I don't want to give all of it away because it's like, you're probably still forming it and it's coming out soon, but tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. In November, anybody part of Right Now Media, there's going to be a new resources coming out called Pastors Plus for the pastors, for the staff. And discipleship framework is going to be 100% included in Pastors Plus, which will be launching January 1st. And really what that is it's like 36 videos. I mean, it's a one-stop resourcing for everything soup to nuts, regardless of your model and approach. It's kind of like consulting in a box. Some of you know StoryBrand or EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System, or System and Soul. A consultant comes in and you get a clear, complete, and customized marketing language, or a clear, complete, customized business strategy for your business. And so instead of a church going to somebody else's model, taking that plan, bringing it back to your church, planning that, and wondering why it doesn't thrive, we guide you through the discipleship framework to ask questions, to think differently about discipleship, and then build your own clear, complete, and customized approach that is your church with your fingerprint. And that's in 4 categories under a vision. So Chris would go through this with his lead team or a couple people, and through 6 meetings, you would clarify your plan for developing leaders. And again, the order of these 4 categories is really important, which we've been talking about for this whole podcast. Start with developing leaders. Then how do you support those leaders? One-on-ones, huddles, emails, t-shirts, whatever. How do you form groups, get people from Sunday into groups? And then how do you equip groups? That's the strategy piece: open, close, men's, women's, Right Now Media, what resources. But we guide you through a 2-page complete and customized approach where you feel ownership. And then we have all the supplemental tools you could need for how to support, equip, ideas, tools, ideas, free templates for how to communicate about groups from stage. You can use all of those in those 4 categories of develop leaders, support leaders, form groups, and equip groups for your church. It's kind of consulting in a box with all the supporting resources. So that's on Right Now Media or on discipleshipframework.com, which will not be live until January 1st.
That's awesome. Bro, I think so many are going to need that.
Yeah.
I'd say one of the top questions I get is, from a pastor who's done one of our 40-day challenges that's like, this was amazing, but how do I maintain it? We saw a decline after because we didn't have a fully polished product ready to go. And I think something like what you're going to provide is definitely going to be something that I'll be telling people about. So that's cool, man. So if you haven't already, like Robby and I are both Right Now Media guys, contributors. You can find some of our resources on their amazing platform. Over 25,000, Chris. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah,
discipleship resources from guys like us, and then other guys like, I don't know, Tim Tebow and Francis Chan. And
never heard of them.
Jenny Allen.
Lightweights. Lightweights.
I mean, Robby and I are on there. All right. Actually, the last time I was on there, I was at a conference. I was at Exponential earlier this year, and the Right Now Media guys were there, and I was like, I wonder where my stuff's at on there. So on their like their homepage, right? They have different categories, and under hidden gems were all of my things. And I was like, okay. I like that they're gems. I don't like that they're hidden. How do I do?
Yeah, that's
so I was like, that's a compliment, and like also, they're there, people.
That's like being the cutest girl in Racine, Wisconsin.
Wow. I know lots of people from Racine, but anyway,
I don't know.
Actually only a couple. But so Right Now Media, if you're not already subscribed, you can go to rightnowmedia.org and figure that out. They can do a live call with you and get your church in. But also right around the time you're doing this, which I bet they're going to dovetail us together for this, Robby, I'm doing a webinar on Right Now Media's platform in November, all around discipleship for all the pastors and leaders. That's a free thing. You don't have to subscribe to Right Now Media to get to be a part of that. But it sounds like they're sinking a lot of resources into discipleship, which is awesome. So I'll put the links to that in the show notes. But awesome, man. This has been super helpful. We ask all our guests to challenge our listeners that if they could practically do one thing this week to be a greater disciple, what would you challenge them to do?
Gosh, that's a great question. All right. So a question like that, I'm practicing actually listening to God. And so what I naturally just did, which was encouraging because I think I'm growing, is my natural response was, God, what do you want me to know? And what do you want me to do? I got simple prayer, breath prayer. Jamie Winship, great author. What do you want me to know? And what do you want me to do? He just asked me a question. I get to share with a ton of people, one discipleship thing. That's a weighty thing. So Spirit, I bet you have an idea better than Robby. So God, what do you want me to know and do? And since I'm a newbie when it comes to hearing from God, I'm going to reflect that that's the tip, that sometime this week, just ask in prayer at some time, God, what do you want me to know? And what do you want me to do? Because that's a catalyst to listen to God instead of what I do, which is talk at him way too much.
I think most of us do that. And so I love that challenge, listeners. If you take that on, hashtag us at Red Letter Disciple. What are you hearing from the Lord? God, what do you want me to know? And what can I do with that? We've gotten a similar answer to that a couple times this season of just that, here I am, send me, Lord, kind of that obedience, I suppose, piece of discipleship that, is not always the easiest, let's say, but so important. So, all right, Chris, what you got for Robby today?
Well, every time we interview a new guest, we try to come up with a game that relates to them.
Yeah.
And this time we created 2 games, and I think, just so you know, Robby, there is a prize if you go 3 for 3. It is your very own sword of the Spirit that we will mail out to you. And it's fantastic. Retail value about $1,200. So here we go.
Which can feed a lot of kids if you end up selling it.
That's like a half a week of groceries for you guys. So that'd be awesome. I'd put it on eBay, get some snacks. Okay. You have a big family. I'm told that you have 8 children, same wife your entire life. Way to go. Here's what we're going to play. Do you have more or less or the same amount of kids than this celebrity? That's what we're going to do. Okay. We're going to start off. We're going to start off with, let's see. Eddie Murphy. Do you have more less, or the same amount of kids as Eddie Murphy?
Oh, I want to cheat so bad. This is like an integrity challenge more than a.
Yeah.
I'm not going to. Eddie Murphy.
Eyes up here, Robbie. Eyes up here.
Yeah, eyes up here. You're playing for an $1,800 sword.
I would tell you if I cheat. We're true face. True face. No, no.
Yeah.
Two-face
Not
here.
lying face, Robbie. Not lying face.
That's right. I have less than Eddie.
The correct answer is less than Eddie Murphy. 1 for 1.
Wow.
He has 10 children. You've got a little work to do to get to Eddie level.
Yeah.
How many wives though?
I listen. I don't know.
No
all
shade,
right.
Eddie. No shade.
All right, let's go. Next couple. Second question. Do you have more or less or the same amount of kids than the former couple, Angelina Jolie or Brad Pitt? Keep in mind, you're playing for the Sword of the Spirit.
Gosh, I think they're like 7 or 8. I'm torn on this of more or same because I know they have a lot and they adopted a couple. So I think it's 7. So I'm going to say more.
You have more. Is that your final answer? You are correct. You are correct. 2 for 2.
Wow.
2 for 2. Man, now we go to the final question. Holy cow.
Come on.
Remember, we're playing for the Sword of the Spirit. All right. This is the last question. This gentleman recently bought Twitter, changed it to X, owns Tesla and SpaceX. Do you have more or the same or less children than the one and only Elon Musk?
As a big Elon Musk fan, unashamedly, I'm pretty sure I have less. I think I heard he has 9.
Okay.
Come on.
The answer is Elon Musk is dad to 8 children.
Oh,
my gosh.
That we know of. The Sword of the Spirit might have told me the real truth. That we know of.
Wow. Wait, what do you have?
You know, here's the thing.
Wait a second.
This season, he's finding some websites that are like years old. And so the one he has, it does say 8. I just typed in real quick to Google, how many kids does Elon Musk have? And it's 11 or 12.
Whoa! Let's go.
What did he say?
What was your answer?
I thought he had 9. I had less than.
Oh, you're right. He's right then.
No, he said less than. Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
we gotta.
Elon had
You
11
just
or
won
12.
a Sword of the Spirit.
Man,
We've played.
ChatGPT just told me he has 10, which is, my new Google. I just typed in ChatGPT.
Yeah.
It says 10.
Yeah, it's 10 to 12. So
We've played.
you won.
We've played 8 games this year. I've been wrong 3 of the times.
Yeah, I got it.
Oh,
We will get this
Fact-checking,
out
man.
to you. We'll send it just as it is. We'll see how it
I
gets.
feel like we're pardon the interruption this year, where every time I got to correct your errors at the end of this episode.
man.
In the 2 minutes I give to you,
we've
my
lost.
goodness.
We-
Yeah.
Gosh,
we
I love
got
being a
to
winner.
we got to crack up our award budget. We've
Yeah, we
gone
do.
through a lot of Swords of the Spirit this year.
And I don't know if I'm going to be able to ship that. So maybe we'll have to meet in person.
Yeah.
And,
I've got the Sword of the Spirit, guys. To James.
All right.
perfect.
Wow,
We're
don't,
gonna
you know,
do that.
All
drop
we're
a
gonna
spiritual
that.
bad joke to wrap out a discipleship podcast. That's terrible.
Awesome, Robbie. Hey, if people want to connect with you, man, where can they find you these days?
Trueface.org.
Awesome.
The best
Awesome,
way.
bro. Thanks for being with us. And I think a super important conversation that if Pastor really does lean in, listen and take heart to this, I think it's just gonna be so important for that development and get that infrastructure set. And yeah, man, just keep doing what you're doing and let's keep connecting. All right.
Back at you. Y'all are awesome.
All right. Take care, bud. Bye. Thank you, Robbie, so much, man. I really love the idea and the intentionality of, the content and all the details. They are important about small groups and how you run them and what season should look like and which program do we use. And of course, we'd love at Red Letter Living to be one of those programs. But the bigger deal, as he said, is let's get the infrastructure in place. Let's raise up leaders who are disciples that can be great small group leaders. And if you've got that, that's the biggest piece. And so, hey, check out more about Robbie Engel, where to connect with him, his ministry, True Face, and where to connect with our partner, Right Now Media. Whether you're not signed up and on their platform yet, you can do that at rightnowmedia.org. And especially jump in that webinar on November 13th. I hope I see you there at rightnowmedia.org/webinars. All those links, if that's like, you're throwing too many links at me. One more link I'm going to throw at you. redletterpodcast.com. We have all the show notes and all the links there. So that's the place to be. Next week, we are closing up shop with one more guest. Actually, there's kind of two guests because Chris Johnson becomes host and he interviews me, and that's happened before. And, I'm excited. I always love to get the mic flipped, but we are welcoming the better half of the Zender family. We're welcoming Allison Zender onto the podcast. Allison writes all of our kids' material for Red Letter Challenge, and she co-wrote the newest book with me that's not necessarily designed just for kids, but for anyone, is Red Letter Advent. And so we're going to talk about Red Letter Advent, why Advent is important. You're going to learn more about who the woman is behind the kids' books and how she grew up in missionary field in Togo, West Africa, and what it's like to work with your husband and to be in ministry together. And so we're going to have a really great conversation led by Chris. And we're super thrilled to have Allison onto the podcast. We're closing, I think, with why not? It's season 7, right? So let's close with my favorite guest of all time, which is Allison Zender. Love you, Allison. And hopefully that gets me a few brownie points if she heard that. So don't miss next week's episode. It's going to be awesome. Subscribe or follow on your favorite platform and give us a rating and review. We'll see you back next week for the finale of season 7.